All right, this is another rendezvous at the forum. We are here with Ina Cariño. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are y'all?
All right, reading from the back of the book. She is a 2022 Whiting Award winner with an MFA in creative writing from North Carolina State University. How did you like that program?
It was great. It was a 2-year program, really short, but nice and generative for me. Yeah.
Okay. And how is that different from most MFA programs?
It's not necessarily different, but they're just varied. Some of them are low residency, so the cohorts are really small. Sometimes they're longer programs, like 3-year programs with a year in between. The first year being, sandwiched so that you have a year writing only in the middle, first and third year, and then in the middle you just write. Most of the time you teach in these, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So their poetry has appeared in American Poetry Review, Guernica Poetry Magazine, The Pearls Review Daily, New England Review. What did you grow up reading? What got you into this whole game, and why? What is one of your favorite publications?
One of my favorite publications. That's hard to say. I grew up reading a lot of classics because my mom is an English teacher as well. I grew up in the Philippines, so I'm bilingual, she taught me a lot of just like grammar stuff, and so I read English from an early age. I guess I would say Lord of the Rings was one of my first things that I started reading from when I was little. I'm kind of a nerd, but I don't know, I've moved on to different things. Poetry is my jam now, so I really love Rose by Lee Young Lee. He's a Taiwanese American writer.
Rose by
Lee Young Lee.
Lee Young Lee. I haven't gotten the chance to read that yet.
Yeah, it's a book of poems as well. It's phenomenal.
So you were doing like other creative writing aside from poetry before you did poetry?
I'm mostly poetry. I started with poetry. I have written some fiction, some nonfiction as well. I prefer poetry and nonfiction.
But if you were to like say your first real creative writing would be
poetry.
Poetry.
Yeah, poetry,
Okay.
for sure. I wrote my first poem in 10th grade in the middle of an English class. I wasn't paying attention at all. This sounds kind of weird, but it felt like I was high when I was writing this poem, and I wasn't. I promise I wasn't. I was just like really into the poem.
What grade was this?
10th grade.
You sure?
I'm pretty sure.
That's around the time I started feeling high as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. That was like my
Yeah.
first times. Yeah, for sure. That's cool. It's an interesting reaction from that.
Yeah.
And when you say high, do you mean like detachment from body, or do you mean
Just like it was a physical sort of like focus that felt like I was floating and in the zone and just very like euphoric at the same time, me writing this poem. That wasn't technically the first thing I'd written creatively. I'd written like silly stories when I was a kid, but that didn't really count. This is something that was really intentional. And then that was my first poem. So yeah.
You mentioned Lord of the Rings. What faction do you enjoy in Lord of the Rings?
What faction?
Yeah, which of those, who are you rooting for in Middle-earth?
Oh, dang.
I'm rooting for the dwarves. That's solid construction. They're living in those mountains.
Oh, I love the dwarves, Mordor and all that.
They built all that, right?
Yeah.
It's fantastic. The craftsmanship. The craftsmanship. Like, I gotta root for these people.
No, for sure. I mean, honestly, they're the underdogs, I think. People look at them, they're like, oh, they're so burly and, like, look kind of weird.
Right,
but,
and
like,
they're, like, smaller
smaller
yeah.
dudes, yeah.
Yeah,
But they're
yeah.
really cool. I like them.
Yeah. So, have you been reading a lot of publications for long?
Yeah, I have. I think one of the things that I taught most in my poetry classes when I was at NC State is that to be a writer, you need to read widely. And I think, I've been reading a lot of contemporary as well as canon authors. I think it's important to read living authors, like living, breathing poets who you might even meet in the community of poets across the country. So I've been reading a lot of Asian American authors lately. Some of them are my friends. I'm in an Asian American writing organization called Kundiman. Kundiman, yeah, I'm a fellow. And I met a lot of them through there. So, I'm friends with Chen Chen, who wrote a lot of popular books that are all poetry as well. Or let's see, Sally Wen-Mao just came out with a new book. Franny Choi is really popular. She's a spoken word artist as well. So yeah, just here and there, mostly poetry.
So like, what do you think? What kind of effect do you think that has when you like actually know who you're reading about, as opposed to somebody who's, you know, their lifetime was a while ago or something?
Yeah, it's interesting. Before I met these people, I had already read some of their work, so taking it at face value on the page, you know, you can only perceive as much as you know from the poem, whereas when you meet these people, or if you hear them read it out loud, you get a different perspective, right? You get a different pace when they're reading out loud. You're like, oh, that's how they would read it. So it gives it a different meaning. And then once you learn about these people, you're like, oh, that's why they did that in this poem, because they're that kind of person, or they have had that experience that influenced one of the poems.
So it's like a bit of a validation, kind of.
A little bit of a validation, and it's really cool. Like, it's almost like it piques my curiosity a lot, and it helps me explore and find more surprise in the poem, like, over time, you know? It kind of changes how you see the poem.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, there's also some kind of lacking there when you can't actually access that author, or when it's like, I mean, especially probably having grown up reading a lot of classics, I'm sure that, like, maybe, I don't know, it might, like, you know, there's certain thing that you can't draw back to the actual author.
Right. I remember in English class, I would always think, man, these English teachers are just making shit up. And they really freaking were, because like, they don't know what the person was writing in the 18th century. They don't know exactly what the, like, yes, obviously, the metaphors that are obvious are, like, totally, like, legit and valid. But, like, sometimes I was like, you're just making this up.
Well, I mean, I think that's a really comforting thing, though, for a writer, right? That someone could have such ownership over your story, that they feel so close and intimate to it that they become the interpreter and, in a way, the disseminator of the story. I mean, I've had writers talk about people coming up to them and tell them, this is how you should write the next book, right? And for some reason they feel that they're so intimately close to that person without ever having spent any time with them at all.
Yeah.
There's magic there, right?
There is a little bit of magic there. It's interesting. People sort of, also, I find that people hold me at arm's length sometimes too. So that can be a little off-putting sometimes, because like I've won these awards and I published this book, all of a sudden I'm not like a person anymore. They're like, oh, you're a writer that I admire. And so I actually ran into someone, a student at NC State, who had read my work, and she follows me on Instagram. And I don't know who she is. She just follows me. And she was like shell-shocked. She was like, oh my God. And I'm just a person. Yeah. But it's really cool, yeah, and like being like the disseminator of all these things and making those connections is really cool. You
touched on something while we were speaking about 3 or 4 minutes back.
Yeah.
Where you told your students to read widely, right? And there's this concept of like, kind of like you are what you eat. Like this concept of consumption kind of defining the body in the sense of identity, or at least peripheral to the things that define the sense of the body.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I think about that a lot. You know, the whole fake it till you make it thing, like you steal other people's ideas that they take and create. They teach you this in creative writing, like steal these ideas, not the actual content, but the techniques that people use, right?
Good writers borrow.
Good writers borrow.
Writers steal.
Exactly. So at the same time, I don't feel like it's really borrowing, because like you're organically changing it into something else, right?
Yeah.
You're the only one that can do what you're doing, if you're not stealing it. But you embody what you write, and what you read influences what you write, right? So you know what's possible.
Well, I mean, the Tagalog word for borrowing is pahingi, right? Can I have, right?
Yeah,
which implies what can I have back, right? You've got to give me something in return, right? This is not just of me.
Yeah.
I'm not just giving this to you.
So it's like a reciprocation.
Yeah, so borrowing implies that there is something that you give back to the origin. And if the origin is dead, all you can do is pay forward. It is not borrowing.
Yeah.
At least not in my sense of understanding of the word. And I'm from the old country too.
Okay, were you born there?
Yeah, I spent 6 years there, and then I got adopted, and I got a new name.
Okay, cool. Wow. Yeah, I was born there as well. I lived there until I was 11. So, yeah. Yeah, pahingi, it's interesting. There's a Filipino concept of like utang na loob, which means we owe you something because you're family or because you're close to us. And this utang na loob can be like kind of toxic sometimes. So I find reciprocation to be kind of a weird subject with Filipinos because they expect something so much in return, right? But through this book that I wrote, I tried to sort of write about nourishment beyond trauma, right? Intergenerational nourishment beyond trauma. Because we are always going to be tethering and untethering ourselves from family and friends like over and over again, right? I think we get to choose what nourishes us over time.
We say untethering from our family and friends. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, as we grow older, you know, we don't always see eye to eye with our parents, some of us more so than others. We don't always end up being close to our families. A lot of us do, a lot of us don't. It just varies. And so sometimes, you know, it's both. Sometimes it's both untethering and tethering. So I grew up kind of in a, you know, very tight-knit household until I was about 11. Moved to the U.S. With my mom, and then she remarried. It was kind of weird. My stepdad and I weren't close, so I felt like I didn't want to be there. So there's that untethering, right? There's that separating, right? And then as I grew older, I started to understand some of their perspectives. I wanted to make that choice to like go back and like make those connections. So like that's what I meant by untethering.
I understand. And as far as untethering and tethering, how do you feel about living in America now?
Yeah,
And tethered here, and like part of your consciousness still tethered somewhere else.
yeah, it's interesting. I am a naturalized citizen already. I was naturalized when I was 23. I have a very like kind of tumultuous relationship with this country, especially you know, after there's been so many things going on lately that seem like it's been more crazy than it had been in like say even World War II, beyond that, or before that. Because not only do we have wars going on in the world, we have, you know, the ongoing pandemic, even if things are a little better now. We have climate change, right? We have all these things going on, so it's insane, right? But I think that one of the things that I keep in mind is just being able to sort of hone in on what is important to us, you know, like beyond all of this madness. I don't know if that is...
What is important to you beyond all this madness? Because what's important to me is oftentimes food. I find that I constantly discuss what I'm going to eat for lunch.
Same.
And I ask people around me, what are you going to have for lunch, for inspiration? Because I don't know what I want all the time. Like Outcast once said, right? They didn't know what they wanted until I gave it to them. That's how I feel about a lot of fast food places. I didn't know you guys had that, and now I want it. That's how I know desire is a blank slate.
Yeah, inspiration for the next meal. Yeah, I think you know, food is one of the motifs that is really like a through line in my book. And I use it not as a presentation of the exotic, as many people might take it at face value, but more as a metaphor for, once again, nourishment. In this country, especially, you know, as a brown body in this country, in diaspora. So when I think about my relationship to this country and how I used food as a symbol, I often talk about that exoticism, like the fetishization, the you know, the tokenism that goes on, and I use language and sonics and musicality and rhythm to sort of envelop those images and turn them into poems.
Right, and one such instance is like this poem, Milk, right? The fetishization of the body kind of turned around, right? You are now fetishizing a white body.
Yeah.
Something that is kind of hilarious to me. The first opening line, a brown sister told me, someone told her, white people smell like milk. And I've never thought this once in my life. I've also never heard this once in my life. But now that I've seen the line, I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's funny, like, someone actually did tell me that, and I don't remember who it was, but it's stuck in my mind. It's just been years and years, and so I don't remember who it was. Someone in college, I think, had mentioned it in passing. But it is sort of like a subversion, right? I subverted the fetishization of the brown body. And at the end, you know, of that poem, it sort of is subverted even more, if you want to read it in my book.
Right.
Eventually.
We won't give that away, but I thought what was also interesting is like you talk about exotic foods. Milk is an exotic food in the Philippines, right? It's a terribly expensive thing because there are no cows really They
Right.
don't have the space for it.
Yeah, only I think only powdered milk is really common over there,
Powdered and condensed.
or like boxed.
Yeah,
Boxed milk?
the canned milk
The
that you would
canned
put
milk?
in like desserts,
Right.
or like in that weird salad, that fruit salad.
Oh,
that
that's
I
so
eat.
weird. I don't know.
I mean, it was like it's like a really thick like fruit salad that has like grapes and other stuff in it, and then this
Grapes,
condensed milk.
yeah.
You know what I'm talking
Yes,
about?
I do. I think they call it like ambrosia or something.
I didn't like it either.
Or like it's just Filipino fruit salad. I don't know.
I stuck around the
Excited.
lechon table. Those
Oh,
the
lechon, yeah.
pieces of skin with the fat underneath it, and I would just sit there with the gravy, and I would wait till people weren't looking at me because like you save some skin for everybody, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm just eating the skin.
Yeah.
That's all I'm doing. I'm a terrible child.
No, I mean that's the crunchy part. That's the good
That's
part.
all I want.
That's exactly what I want. Yeah.
Right. So I wasn't the only one.
No, I was definitely that person. I was
Okay.
definitely that kid. It's funny. There was my grandfather was very superstitious, and when I was born, they had like a celebration right afterwards, and they had like lechon, they had a whole spread, they had like pancit, lumpia, all this food, and there's a superstition that if you cut the tongue of the pig off, it's already cooked. It's dead. Right?
Mhm,
I'm not talking about a live thing,
No,
but
man, he's been on the spit for hours.
It's been on the spit, it's been
That's
on
no
the spit.
longer a living, breathing creature. That has become food. in our
exactly.
eyes.
So they take the tongue and they put it in the mouth of the newborn as a way to encourage good speech, good literacy as they grow up. And they wanted that for me. And I don't know if that is what made me a writer, but here I am. So, yeah.
I mean, the blessing incurs like the blessing of a village. The village kind of gives to you what they think of that blessing, and then it kind of enforces that. So it could be. I mean, everything's related.
Yeah, I think so. I
And
mean,
also, ghosts do exist.
I think they do too. I'm pretty superstitious. I don't even call it superstition. I just have a belief in these folk stories, right, that I grew up with. They're very important to Filipino culture,
Yeah.
like how we relate to each other
Like
and
the
not
manananggal.
manananggal. Yeah,
God,
that's
that
very-
terrified me. My mother used to tell me, "Don't go out at night. There's this woman, and she will poach you and grab you."
But it's not just a woman.
No, it's
only
half
the
of a
top
woman.
half of a woman.
Top half of a woman. She's very sexy during the day. My mother made a very clear point of this. She's
Oh,
a very
that's
sexy
so
woman.
specific.
And what is
She's
her
like
name?
beautiful during the day.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
she
At
just
nighttime.
told you that.
Yeah, she's like, she wants me to be scared of beautiful women. I understand this, which is a very good thing to teach a child, right?
Okay.
You want them to have that trauma.
You want
You
them
want
to
them
to-
avoid beautiful
you
women.
need-
You want them to
Trauma.
avoid everybody. Is really what you want them to do. But yeah, this terrifying witch woman that would grab you and then just take you back to her house.
Well, it's also
and eat you?
it basically eats you, and it's almost like the aswang. It's almost like a vampire version.
Yeah.
A version of a vampire rather.
Right.
Because she hides her bottom half as well.
Yeah, if you get to it. you
That's
can-
when you can destroy her.
Yeah.
Because that's her totality, right?
So
That's
yeah.
a really interesting concept.
It's
Like you're
weird,
thinking of
which
Left
is
4
a
Dead.
further infliction of a wound because it's the bottom half that contains her real identity, which is a weird thing. That
Yeah,
we made
weird
as
thing.
part of that
And,
story.
and so it's to discourage you from going out at night?
It was for me, but I'm sure that it's been used as a tool.
Many
for other
different ways,
instances.
okay.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
yeah.
Any
it
sort
is
of
a
way to
folk-
scare
It is a
kids.
folk
yeah.
tale. Yeah, it's
But
a
it
folk
is
tale.
a folktale based on a lot of folk superstitions that are not just like for kids to hear. Like, I don't know how far back it got. You can go, but you hear about a swang, which is the vampire.
Mm-hmm.
The chanak was the monster baby that hides in the grass, and then you pick it up and then it eats you. Like stuff like that. It's kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just they want you to live in fear so you can live happily in the home, because that's what it's about, is control.
I feel like trauma.
And I mean,
definitely-
cradle stories are notoriously, like, and it's not cradle, it's when you're older, but like notoriously dark. I mean,
They really are.
Trauma
yeah.
builds some character, man.
Trauma
Don't get me
does
wrong.
build
Trauma.
I
does
mean,
that.
no, we are not invoking trauma as a useful thing.
It's a good thing, though.
It's a good
I would
thing.
think people need trauma just to build
Well,
character.
yeah, I mean, you need trauma. I don't know. I don't want to get into
Like
this.
people who've never had trauma before, they're just like completely oblivious to like bad things.
Yeah, but there's certain
Yeah.
things. But
There are limits.
one thing that I was thinking, because the poem "Milk" came up to me as well, and with like this fetishization, that language is just very common and actually ingrained in some parts of language. But like in terms of when did you start thinking about using your voice as a mechanism to speak for yourself, and like in some ways to speak up just against like nonsense?
So I actually I was an English major in college, but I also double majored in violin performance. And I had not thought about creative writing for years and years because I was stuck in the music side, right? I was just very engrossed in music. And then after school ended, I applied to grad school on a whim. And when I got into the grad program, I was very surprised, really happy. I ended up writing things that were just fluff. Like, they were pretty, right? They were beautifully constructed. They sounded cool, but it meant nothing. So when I got my advisor, Eduardo Corral, who's the son of Mexican immigrants, he's a very well-awarded poet as well. He was, I believe, longlisted for the National Book Award a few years ago, but he's one of my mentors. And he said to me, don't be afraid to write yourself on the page. Don't be afraid to write your language on the page. Like, I don't italicize all my language, the foreign words, quote unquote, in the poems, because I want to non-essentialize them. I want them to be blended in and normalized, because that's my reality. So why can't you work a little harder to understand my reality when I've been reading Shakespeare for years and being forced to analyze it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's sort of how I think about it. It's that that enabled me to really write myself on the page.
So I guess, did you have like interior barriers before that, or was it just something that you hadn't necessarily thought to do?
I definitely had barriers because I didn't want to be pegged as just a Filipino writer, right? I didn't want to be just that token writer. But I think one of the things you have to do also, if you want to write about these things that happen to be about your culture, you just can't worry about the audience. You have to put it out there, what's important to you. If you write a poem that's not about being a Filipino, that's fine. If you write about food and whatever, that's fine. Just write what you want to write, right? Yeah.
And don't be afraid to write yourself on the page.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And speaking of William Shakespeare, we have here a refusal of a sonnet. Ina Cariño, you want to talk to me a little bit about how it is a sonnet in line only, in 14 lines. Most of these don't follow iambic pentameter, and there are no end line rhymes. Yet it's still a very, very good poem.
Thank you.
Right? So what is this refusal of iambic pentameter, and why have it in 14 lines to resemble, at least from the outside, a sonnet?
Well, sonnets are traditionally love poems, right? A lot of sonnets are love poems.
Yeah.
And one of the lines in that poem is, real love is when you loot a crate of lard-filled cans, throw it in the Pacific to feed your ancestors.
Yeah.
Right? That's a love poem.
I wrote Balikbayan box.
Balikbayan, yeah.
I used to do that with my mom, and we would shrink wrap them so that they would like take up less space.
Yeah.
And then put clothes on top, and then shrink wrap the whole box so that none
Shrink
of it
the
would.
whole box?
Yeah, so that it wouldn't get damaged.
Wow, that's a lot of shrink wrapping.
Yeah. So we would buy the shrink wrap because it was important that this would get back to our family members.
Yeah, balikbayan means return to country, right? So we would send these boxes back to our family in the Philippines, giving them things that they wouldn't have access to, like chocolates that I would never get, clothes that they would never have access to. Just like some things that are like representative of our love for them, but also it kind of shows the contrast between the wealth of the two countries too, right? That's kind of sad.
Right. Can we talk about what? Okay, so I sent Chips Ahoy, Spam,
Yeah.
Oreos, stuff we didn't even get to eat at home because like my mom didn't want me eating that stuff.
Yeah, but it's for them, so
It's
you want
for them.
to, yeah.
Yeah.
There's that reciprocation again, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, you want to take care of these people because they're still over there. The country's a very poor country,
Yeah,
right? It's riddled with drug wars right now. Riddled with a lot of
overstuffed jails. They don't know what to do
Overstuffed
with
jails,
criminals,
exactly.
and the criminal system is at a still standing point.
Yeah, exactly. The former president Duterte had a decree which is kind of horrendous, where you can basically kill or shoot anyone on site if they are suspected of being a drug user or a drug pusher. And that can be used as an excuse for anything, right? The police can do it, a regular citizen can do it, and there's no repercussion, no jury, no trial, nothing. So the body count of all of this, plus also collateral damage, children have died, right, is above 12,000. They stopped counting after 12,000. It's been years. So to think about that is a self-inflicted genocide of the country, right? That is ridiculous.
One that ABS-CBN won't cover.
No, they
Trump
won't.
applauded it,
Right.
in terms of like he actually like
Yeah, I mean,
wanted to implement something similar here, which is insane.
He applauded the silencing of journalists in that country because the
Yeah.
party did a swell job silencing all those journalists by stuffing them into the chassis of Honda Civics and then burying those Honda Civics.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal, and people don't realize this is going on. Like, you know, it's continuing to go on. So, yeah. But yeah, that sonnet is a love poem. I wanted to finish with a thought that I had about that, the sonnet. I didn't use iambic pentameter or rhyming because I think forms like sonnets or villanelles or sestinas, whatever, are useful and can be like puzzles that you solve in this time, but you can make them your own now.
Yeah.
You know, it is no longer the 18th century where these things are so rigid that you can just, you know, you can do whatever you want and subvert the form, making it your own. I like that. I like disrupting the language while keeping that form. See, like, look, I can still do it, but it's mine.
And speaking of subverting form, excellent segue. We have like a tercet here, or a triptych. I'm not sure. I don't remember what this was called, but it was introduced to me by Edward Moten in Field Trio. And in Field Trio, he has these triple columns, and each column stands out as a poem of its own, but it can also be read all the way across as a singular poem, right? I Sing Despite the Tender Stench Outside. Right? Can you talk to me a little bit about that poem?
Yeah, so this is a poem that was added later to the manuscript after it won the Alice James Award. And, you know, you can shuffle around, you can take some away, you can add some, as long as the main manuscript is sort of intact. So this was during Trump's presidency that I wrote this. And I think that you can see the influence on that. You know, they're talking about flags, anthems. But it also is a puzzle, like I said. You can read it across, you can read it down each column. And this kind of poem is called contrapuntal. Contrapuntal, because you can read it multiple ways. So I love doing that. And my mentor actually told me, stop doing that, you do that too much. Because I'm actually good at making them like fit, like a puzzle. So it was influenced by, you know, being in the Trump presidency. It was influenced by my love, like the love for challenges like that. For puzzles, I really kind of am a brainiac when it comes to words. So that's kind of what it stemmed from. Yeah.
Norman Doobie Jr. talks about the art of puzzle making. He used to teach at Arizona State University. He passed away recently. He always said that you never want to be known for just one thing, and it's not our job to be clever. But this is quite clever, and it's quite good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I enjoy the endings of all of these lines. Right, money fains will ring, music bitter taught. A ratty flag, elegies fail. The old guard will make, even crumbs nourish. And these are three cadences that have their complete voice that's kind of encapsulated in these lines, but then when you read them across, it's a completely different cadence.
It's a different poem, different rhythm.
Yeah, it's clever.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
It's good.
I enjoy doing that kind of thing.
So what is your favorite Filipino snack?
Oh my.
I have so many.
Well,
I have choconut.
oh, I love chocolate.
Do you love choconut?
I do. It's not my favorite though.
What?
What is it?
Choconut is a chocolate peanut delicious thing.
It's like
It's
if
a
you
little
took
bar.
Reese's Pieces but made it more integrated. The peanut butter is more integrated with the chocolate.
Yeah.
More better.
It's a
And made
little
it like a
cup.
powder. It made it like a powder.
Okay.
And then made that powder into a bar. And then you put that bar in your mouth, and then when it gets wet, it slowly melts.
Exactly.
Ah,
Yeah, it's
okay.
so good. It's
It's
like the texture is different, but it's like so simple and so good. I guess my favorite. I grew up eating like a lot of junk food, to be honest. And I would often go to the Sari Sari store, the convenience store
Yeah.
owned by like a neighbor.
Yeah.
My family owned one too.
Mong Ray owned ours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was our friend, Uncle Ray. Mong
Oh,
Ray.
okay, okay.
It was Mong Ray's store. He always had live crabs.
Oh,
which was a
okay.
big plus for us. We're allergic to crabs. My whole lineage
Really?
is allergic to crabs. But my mother would make me eat crabs with her, and she'd like, this will raise your tolerance. So that
Oh,
you can enjoy
yeah,
this.
that theory.
It's like, or you'll die.
Yeah.
So like just eat until you feel a little bit of swelling.
Either way, you're building character.
And then once you start feeling that swelling, drink some vinegar. It'll thin your blood.
Vinegar.
And then just relax and stop eating. And I did that for several years.
Ooh,
When's the last time you had
Did it
crab?
work?
Yeah.
I can eat crabs, but I still have a mild allergic reaction. But the allergic reaction used to be more severe.
So do you think that it
Was
worked?
was it worth it?
I don't think that you should be injecting scorpion venom to become immune to scorpion venom. No.
All right, fair.
Yeah, I don't think you should.
I mean,
be
that's
inflicting
ki-
trauma. I don't think you should inflict trauma to become Superman, so that trauma doesn't affect you, because no one ever asks how Superman
that's-
is doing.
Yeah, you didn't.
No
need the
one
crab.
asks how Superman is doing. He's
That's
upset
kind of
all
how
the
they
time.
do allergy shots here. I don't know if anybody here does.
I've had allergy shots.
That's pretty much what they do. Like they'll see whatever you're allergic to, and they'll do like a little bit of an injection every week, and then
Huh.
after like a month or so, you keep going up and up until
Yeah.
it
It's
doesn't.
called inoculation. I understand the concept. I'm not gonna do it. Again,
It's
I'm
not
gonna
required
force
for
my child-
crabs.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna force my child to do it, because if my child dies in front of me from crab poisoning, the cops are not gonna believe me when I tell them.
Okay, but when you taste crab, that might change your mind
Taste
a little
of crabs
bit.
are delicious.
There are.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
live ones.
A lot of
right
work.
there.
I mean, that's my only
For a
issue
good
with
cause,
it.
though.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't
It's
like to.
good food.
I don't work.
It's
that
different
hard.
if you get in
I
like
don't know.
Chicago
He
or
doesn't
something,
work
then
that
it's
hard.
not worth it.
Yeah.
Tyler Lully, he doesn't work. I don't work that hard. Tyler Lully, 20.
I like, I'm all for work and like when you enjoy it and want to put your heart into it, but crabs,
crabs, yeah. It's crabs.
not for me.
No?
But no, I'm like, give me a salmon. I don't need to
Give
work
me
for it.
salmon.
Just cut the little bottom layer, cook it. You can even have it, raw lox.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
just
good.
about anything
Yeah.
you want with a good cook.
My favorite Filipino snack is this little thing called muncher. Nobody knows what it is anymore because it was in the 90s, right? And it's just like a bag of salty, crunchy peas.
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Were they garlic?
It was like garlicky.
Yeah, dude.
It was like salty. It was so good. I just like threw
They
it back.
have like a hard outer shell, but when you get on the inside, it's further crunches all the way down.
Wait, no, I think you're talking about nagaraya.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's nagaraya, which is peanuts.
Yeah.
Those
I
are good.
those too.
But muncher, nobody knows that anymore.
No.
It very neat.
Big shout out to
You know
Muncher wherever you
Ovaltines?
are right now.
Yes, muncher man.
You know Ovaltines?
Oh yeah,
The
of
little,
course,
little-
Ovaltine. I remember the jingle.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm old. But yes, to answer your question, that's my favorite snack.
Nice.
Doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, what's your favorite Filipino meal?
Oh my gosh, you can't do this to me.
He loves the best stuff.
Oh, these questions have to be asked. Adobo doesn't taste right when anyone else makes it besides me and my mother. Like, I
Sure.
inherited the recipe, right? So
Sure.
this is the one that I grew up with.
Yeah.
Anything else to me is not
I'm
it.
trying to see
Yeah, that makes
how
sense.
Filipino you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite is actually dinuguan. Do you know what that is? Dinuguan?
Now, is that taro leaves?
No. Dinuguan is a stew made with pork and pork blood. So when you cook
No,
it,
I've never had that.
it looks dark like chocolate, like dark brown, dark. And sometimes you can put sayote in it. You put a little chili pepper in there, put it over rice. Delicious.
Dude,
I brought
I've
it to
never had
school
this.
when I was in 5th grade, and I was already here in America. And nobody believed me. They were like, "That's not pork blood. That's not blood. You're just making it up." And I'm like, "But it's so good, and I'm telling the truth."
How does it taste?
It tastes savory. It's very smooth. It doesn't taste like acrid or anything like you would think.
I've had blood before. That's not the part that concerns me.
Hmm.
What concerns me is that I've never had this.
It's really good. You can make it a little spicier. You can make it not spicy. It's just a comfort food for me, because my grandmother used to cook a lot for us, and that was like the best when she made it, right? But I also like tinola, like sinigang, kare-kare, all these standard foods that nobody knows about because people only know 3 Filipino foods: lumpia, pancit, and adobo.
What about Luzon Express or
Bicol Express.
Bicol Express?
Yeah, Bicol Express is so good. I just had some the other day.
It's tasty.
Huh, yeah.
Pork kawali. Do you like mang tomas, the sauce?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah, that's made with chicken livers.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. For like,
chicken livers, breadcrumbs. So weird, right?
yeah, it's
Well,
super weird.
That's the thing about my book, though. It's like one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how brown people sort of are able to just like eat whatever.
Right.
Because this is what they grew up with. This is what we had. We made do with what we had, right? And so when you come to this country and people are like, oh, that's gross. I'm like, well, I don't know. This is what we grew up with. So it's part of our identity, right?
Right.
Maybe cows are
we grew
gross.
up without separation from the food, right?
Yeah.
When I got to America, the first question I asked was, because I was handed a cheeseburger from McDonald's.
Oh.
I asked, where are the cows? Right, because there are no cows.
You asked where the
around.
cows are?
Yeah, I asked
Oh.
where they're killing anything. Where they're killing anything, because as we kept going further and further away from the airport, there were no animals anywhere
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Okay, which is super strange. Usually there's some animals. I grew up from like the rural part of Zamboanga, and then I moved to Manila later on, and then I got adopted from Manila.
Yeah.
So I've seen how like units of markets work, where it's like, oh, the animals are like maybe a quarter mile away, then the animals are brought into the market after they're killed, and then they're distributed there.
Yeah.
This was a different thing for me.
Right.
Right, and then in your title poem Feast, you describe seeing the slaughter of a pig, right?
Yeah, this was actually based on a during my 5th birthday. Yeah, I remember that. I looked out the window, pulled the curtains back, and I was like, oh, okay. I could not take my eyes away. At the same time as being freaked out, you know, you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Like, I didn't comprehend truly what that meant, right, at that age. But it was a little bit freaky, just seeing a pig killed in front of you, right?
Did you know the pig?
I did not. I did not.
You didn't get to know
We
it.
had roosters. We had roosters. We had dogs. We had a cat at one point. We had mostly roosters and chickens, you know, but just a big wall of them to get their eggs and stuff. But I did not know the pig. They
And
brought
what-
the pig in specially.
How do you feel about the consumption of meat today? Do you still do it?
Oh yeah, I was pescatarian for a little bit. I think it's a complicated issue because right now there's a lot of sort of white supremacist ideas about veganism that I just I cannot get with.
Did you say
It's
white
fine.
white supremacist ideas of veganism?
Yeah, people don't realize the connection. Like, I think it's fine to be vegan. However, there's like the whole like yoga mom wellness system that is turning alt-right right now. You think I'm crazy, but look it up.
I don't know what's going on because this is the first time I'm hearing of this. You're gonna need to
I mean, I live in
contextualize
Cary,
me.
so I know what you're talking
I mean,
about.
yeah, like I
know
kind
what
of
you're
get it
talking
when you
about.
go into like a Whole Foods, you kind of see it. Or, like
this
not
is
necessarily.
all
I go into Whole Foods. I'm not trying to share.
I mean,
them, but
Cary
like,
is like the
like you see, I
encompasses
kind of
that.
see.
Well,
like,
everyone seems to be
certain-
beating around the bush. Someone tell me what the bush is.
The bush is that these people who are predominantly white are co-opting cultural as well as, you know, cultural practices as well as cultural like artifacts like food, yoga. It's just blown up. Spirituality, telling people how to take care of themselves has become something that they've co-opted. So now it's no longer something that is true to the spirituality of yoga, for example, or true to the roots of like, why are we eating this food? Instead, it's marking like, oh, I'm better than you because ethically I'm a moral superior person, right? So there's a whole industry that is behind it. You can look it up. There's been like reports done on how these yoga gurus out there are really just like taking advantage of people and putting other people down.
Well,
There also,
I
there
figured
also
that
is a
was-
cost to being vegetarian or vegan. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
just
it's
healthy.
obviously like
Right.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
well,
yeah.
not the health. I mean, just like the fiscal cost first.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah, basically, like, you can be vegan on a budget. However, it's very hard, especially when you're a brown person or a poor person. There's that accessibility issue, too. The access is not the same for white people as it is for brown people. And just because so a lot of brown people have had, you know, vegetarian diets in their cultures as well. Like, we're not exempt from that. But I think the issue is when the access is just not there. What if I can't afford an alternative milk? What if the alternative milk, such as almond milk, cough cough, is actually bad for the environment because of how much water it uses to produce that amount of almond milk, for example, right?
Right.
So tofu as well, it's bad for the environment, how much is mass produced now. So just all these things, all these factors, like, I think it's fine to be vegan and vegetarian. That's a very personal choice, right? I'm not going to shame you for your diet, but the other side of it always shames us, right? That's what I think.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty obvious. Like the U.S. is like trying to just mass manufacture meat, like food, and like not really caring about health standards. Or that's why, like you said, anywhere you go, whatever it is, like vegan or anything that's not red meat, it's gonna be more expensive because it's harder to make. But like
Right.
things that are harder to make are usually better for you. That's
Right.
why they're harder to make.
Right.
So
And you
like,
wonder why you have a lot of like differences in like obesity levels across demographics, right?
right. I
Social
mean,
stratus.
yeah. Every time I think about it, it's funny. I always just think about Wall-E, and just the whole concept of the movie. I'm like, we're about there.
We're there.
We're about there. Yeah.
And I
It's
mean,
like,
yeah, if you look at like a lot of city centers, as you go like a mile out from the city center, typically the life expectancy goes down like a year per mile. That was especially true in like not the U.S. but in Glasgow and then London. I guess that's not as necessarily tied to race, but it still is, and especially especially London. But I mean, it kind of like, yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't have ready access to. I mean, especially non-white people, like more likely to have not as good of access to good grocery stores, and for a variety of like reasons that are also tied into that. But anyways, so seeing this animal, it was unintentional then when you see it.
Yeah, it was not that they were trying to hide it from me. They sort of just let me run around. It was my birthday, right?
You're right.
Yeah.
So, but then I was
What are they
like, "What
gonna
is
do?"
that noise? What is screaming? What
Yeah.
is So I drew the curtain back. Oh, yeah, it was unintentional.
And seeing it, I mean, it's like I would just presume did it change the way in that moment that you ate meat at all, or did it change the way that you consumed at all, or did it just change, I guess, your relations at all with it, or was it just kind of like an acceptance?
It wasn't really an acceptance, and it wasn't an immediate change because I was so young. I think that it was something that I thought about over time and thought about as I looked back at my life and thought, wow, that kind of wasn't, exactly a normal thing for a 5-year-old to see necessarily, or something that a 5-year-old should have seen. At the same time, I didn't react because I didn't make the connection that this was what I was going to eat. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, they're killing this thing. And then I see a lechon on the table. I wasn't like, oh, that's the same thing. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, there's food, right? And then, going back to that idea of like, do I eat meat? Am I comfortable eating meat? Like, yes, I am, because it's cultural too, right?
Yeah.
It's tied to who I am. Food is communal in the Philippines, as in a lot of cultures across the world. Food is communal in a way that is different from, like Thanksgiving. It's
Right.
not quite the same.
Yeah.
It is a little more visceral. It is a little more tied to history that is a history of oppression. So
Yeah.
we have these foods, these peasant foods, right? That turn into our national dishes. They used to be peasant foods because that's what they had. They made stews out of like the weird parts of the animal. So that's sort of why I'm okay with eating meat, because like that is my history.
It's also like this idea of culturally being closer to death, right? This idea of that we have Dia de los Muertos, we have the Day of the Dead, the Reckoning
Yeah,
of the Dead,
Fundas.
All Saints Week. Like we have times to spend with the dead. We commune with our dead.
Yeah.
Right.
I actually practice this thing. It's pretty common in the Philippines, at least in Luzon, the northern part, where you make atang, which is an offering to your elders who have passed away or your ancestors. During a celebration, we always do this. We take a little bit of every food, make a little plate for our ancestors, put it somewhere high, and then they're able to join us for the celebration. So that's something that I still do.
We don't do that in the South. Or, I don't remember doing any of that.
Yeah, really?
No.
Oh, well,
I remember
it's
a parade, and it ended with a piñata in someone's backyard, but all of us in the streets with candles.
But so in this, there's a real reverence for history and for
Yeah.
the people who your lineage and your life. I mean, I think it's interesting. I guess like tying that into within Feast, something that I kind of see like the Spanish invasion of the Philippines come up, and kind of its inflection within food and language. I guess. Where am I going? But exactly, I mean, it's just something that is raised, and I guess how did these like the way that you interact, I guess, with history through these what you do. How does that how do you reckon with that in light of kind of like some of it not being great, I guess, some of it being like violent, and
the whole history of the Philippines is that it's been bastardized over time, right? That is a fact. We are no longer the same as the indigenous tribes that we started as. And sometimes more than other cultures, because not only did the Spanish take over the country, it was not just a little bit of time. It was like 333 years or something like that. And then the Japanese occupied the country, and then the U.S. occupied the country.
And then Douglas MacArthur said he'd be right back.
Yeah.
He never came back.
Oh no, my grandmother was like, he's gonna come back.
Dude, my mom is still salty about that. She's like, he promised us statehood.
Yeah.
You know, we're supposed to be a state. She often says that.
Was that that was promised?
That was a promise
It
that
was a
Douglas
promise
MacArthur made that y'all broke.
It was definitely a lie.
My bad.
It was a lie.
Yeah.
I mean,
My bad,
they
dude.
lie to brown people
All the
consistently.
time.
I mean, Cambodia. I mean, Jesus.
Yeah.
This poem, right? My childhood is a country of thieves, right? False saints donning Spanish brocade capes to rob me rancid.
Yeah. So I was gonna say too, that poem is actually about the drug wars as well as the Spanish sort of occupation and the bastardization that happened. And I reckon with it in a way that is kind of like I'm facing it, right? I'm not gonna look away from the ugly parts. And I'm not gonna say, well, I don't wanna look at that. Filipinos are the way they are, and that's it. Like, we're not reduced to that one thing, right? At the same time, like, I also think about my grandfather. He was a quarter Spanish. So it's in my family. It's in my blood. He had blue eyes, right? He was a Filipino who had blue eyes. So I have Spanish blood in me. I'm fairly sure I have other, cultural ethnicities inside that I have not even thought about. And I was like, maybe I should take one of those DNA tests, but also, I don't know, maybe, I don't know.
I mean, the concept of being is very strong here, right? To be a thief is to unstick the plastic glow-in-the-dark stars from the ceiling, right? To take what's for display and put it in your pocket, right? To be a poet is to write about the hollows that take their place, to look at the empty spaces where those intricate trinkets and beautiful artifacts used to be, these things that used to make up our culture, right? To be a child is to love what's left. So you say that there's an identity here, a process, a progressive identity of like almost like an accusation. Theft has occurred here. Someone has taken these stars from our ceiling.
Yeah.
I'm writing about these stars, and then but I still love what is left.
Yeah, and I'm the poet trying to take the hollows and be poetic about them. I'm taking a jab at poets too. Like, how is this helpful? What are we doing, right? I mean, I'm trying my best through art to be able to sort of speak against or for certain things. But at the same time, I feel like it's almost inadequate sometimes. I feel helpless, I guess. Like, I want to do more. And I'm hoping this can offer some people some sort of inspiration to do those things. But because that's my trade, whatever, this is what I do, I sometimes feel like I'm not doing anything, which I don't think that all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's definitely an existential crisis, right? To write about something, but to point at the hollow of something is to tell others it's not there.
Yeah, and to be poetic about it is to just be like sort of, oh yeah, look at that beautiful hole. Like, it's a beautiful cavity. What are you actually doing? But pointing at it, right?
Right. Who has the thing that went inside?
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, my grandfather's Spanish. I believe I have some Chinese in me as well because of the Chinese immigrant influx that happened over the years. The first Chinatown was actually in the Philippines, so you should look that up. But I think about the Spanish a lot because my last name is actually Cariño. It's a Spanish word, right? It means darling, sweetie. It's a term of endearment. And it's my father's side. And the Cariños are kind of regarded as the stewards of the land in my hometown, which is up in the mountains. And this is a huge sort of part of Luzon that they take care of symbolically. Because one of my ancestors, who you can actually find on Wikipedia, Mateo Cariño, he has his own page. he is known for having defended my hometown and the tracts of land that were ancestral from Spanish garrison.
Nice.
And then the U.S. tried to sort of confiscate these lands as well. And he went and sort of like sued them, right, all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And this was like in the late 1800s into the early 1900s. He died and he won posthumously, and it's a ruling called Native Title, which is a poem of mine also. I named one of my poems Native Title. It's not in this book. It's on Poetry Magazine, Poetry Magazine's website. And I think that one of the most important things to take away from this is that this ruling was kind of what I call a legal Mobius strip, because it says indigenous people can live on their land if they can prove that they have already been living there. Like, that's rife with redundancy, right? That's so redundant.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ridiculous. Like, just leave them alone.
It makes you have to prove that you've been like. That's just asking to be
The fact that
bullshitted
they're
with,
there.
like,
who's
you know,
your,
like that.
Right.
who owns
Yeah.
the title to this land?
Yeah, how do you
Okay.
prove that you've been living on this land that you've lived on forever?
Right, exactly.
know?
Which they did win, they did win the case. But so now that land is being protected by my family, my dad's side over in the Philippines. So my next project is actually exploring all of that, because I was really young when my parents divorced, and I don't know my dad's side of the family that much, so I'm trying to do some research. There's pictures of Ina Cariño and my ancestors in the archives at Harvard's Radcliffe archives, I believe. So I don't know, I'm trying to look into that as well.
I was getting in touch with your heritage.
Yeah?
I am the illegitimate great-great-grandson of Rogelio de la Rosa.
Really?
Yeah, he's like a silver screen
He
matinee bastard that has my hair. And
Has your
he kind of looks like him.
Really?
Yeah, like a little
face.
bit, like
He has his own
vaguely.
Wikipedia too. He
Little
was
bit.
corrupt.
Wow.
As a politician, he was corrupt.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm just a long line of many illegitimate seeds of his.
That's wild.
That one. I mean, I guess you could prove it through DNA, but
Yeah.
illegitimate. It's so hard to
Illegitimate,
prove.
truly illegitimate. Yeah,
So you were not the heir.
I'm nothing.
That's not true.
Co-host on the forum.
Yeah, right.
Co-host on the forum. It's a big
I
thing,
have
dude.
I have no heritage. I have no kingdom. There's nothing waiting for me up there.
It's got really dark.
Yeah.
It did.
I would like to go
It's
back
always
to the
there's always
Philippines,
one
though.
point of the
Yeah,
interview.
I want some
How long has
taho.
it been? Have you
Taho,
gone?
taho. The guy that's always walking around taho.
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 No, we would go every morning before school. I would have a bowl of taho.
I couldn't do that. That was too sweet.
Oh.
I mean, I would eat half of it and just be like, it's,
Oh, I love
I'm getting
it.
sick.
Too
I'm
much
starting to get
sugar.
sick.
Too much sugar. But I would do it anyway.
I don't know. I loved it. But those little tapioca balls, shit was fucking fire.
Yeah.
And there's also halo halo after school, and then the
After
bread.
school, I never had halo halo until only on holidays.
No, there's always a guy that has shaved ice at the corner store.
Oh, you sound like you're spoiled.
No, there's a city.
Okay.
There's a city. It's 25 centavos. You couldn't get 25 centavos?
That's okay.
You can get
I
that
was in the
begging.
mountains. I
Right,
was in the
no
mountains.
city. No city life there, Limited to taro roots. Gotta eat them out of the ground.
Funny. Yeah. But yeah, just trying to see what my family has to offer historically. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a running joke that every time that an Americanized Filipino goes back that you have to bring back money because a lot of people are going to be asking for it. At least in my family.
No, it is a running joke, but it's also slightly serious.
Yeah.
And if you don't bring it back, they're actually like pretty mad.
It hurts.
It does hurt because they think you're like rich,
They think you're balling.
and it's at the same time you're not. You
Well,
know,
you are.
I mean, you
They're-
can be
If you save.
if you save, but to them you are balling.
Right.
It's also like sorry, not to cut you off.
Very good.
I was gonna say it speaks to like this like kind of messed up link of nourishment that kind of from like government that doesn't really provide here properly to then people expecting this like false reality of what kind of they think is happening, and then you can't actually, the nourishment line is like, because they want from you want to help them, but there's not necessarily the ability that people think there is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct. Well, yeah, it's funny you say that because actually, at my last job, I had a coworker who started the job. He was from Afghanistan, and he came here. He was a really brilliant guy. You know, I could tell he was well spoken. Obviously, didn't have the greatest English, but he had kind of the same conception that everything here was just you're gonna make a lot of money, everything's gonna be pretty and bright, and then he found out what taxes were. He found out about healthcare. He found out about the education here, and he was like, okay, maybe I was a little overzealous about it. And it was just funny because, like, yeah, you're absolutely right that people do think that about us. Because I think we do have that misconstrued, like,
Yes.
light that we shine on things that are great.
It's the world that's portrayed in, like, popular film, I guess, in music versus the world that's
right,
on the
exactly.
ground living.
Right.
They see our movies and they're like, oh, they must all look that
And that's
gorgeous.
not the only,
so, like,
not just film,
yeah.
but
I mean,
that's it well.
there's always that idea of like quality of life is better here in terms of like, yes, we have streets that are paved.
Yeah.
You know, like, yes, for the most part,
We have, that in the
running
Philippines.
water.
We have that in the Philippines. Not
Some,
everybody.
but that's the thing.
Not
It's
everybody.
not the majority, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not the majority. So when people think of the U.S. and the Philippines, I remember growing up, I was there until I was 11, right? And at school, they would say things like, wow, you know, America's so great. If you talked about our president here in a bad way, like in the Philippines, you know, you'd get shot, which is
Right.
true. But in America, you know, you can just say shit about the president and you won't get shot. Like, that's amazing. It's a love-hate relationship too, though, because they're like, it's not fair.
Right.
Because they used to be here. They didn't help us.
I mean, yeah, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. Like, coming from Afghanistan, he was definitely leveling up. Because, yeah, there's just a bunch of shit going on there. But
yeah.
it was.
I guess
yeah.
there is an aspect to, I mean, you might not be able to read some of your poetry in the Philippines
Oh,
without
no.
feeling, you know,
Right,
like
yeah.
in terms of, yeah. So, but, yeah. Do you guys have anything?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to get back to your violin career. I want to hear about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to hear how that sprouted and, like, how you kind of.
Okay. Yeah.
Gauge
When
that.
when I moved here and got into public school in 5th grade, they said, "Do you want to join chorus or orchestra?" And I said orchestra because I didn't want to sing.
You don't like singing?
Because I grew up like in a very Catholic sort of upbringing, and they sent me to a Montessori school, a private school that was also slightly Catholic, and we would just like sing all the time. I'm like, I'm tired of that. Let me learn something new. And that's actually kind of an older age to start an instrument, to be able to say like, oh, I want to major in this. Unfortunately, a lot of the time these like so-called virtuosos start when they're like from the womb, basically. But I was like, no, let's try it, and I was actually naturally like good at it. I eventually decided to study it, and I got into the ECU School of Music in Greenville, which is not a conservatory, but it is like one of the up and coming sort of like, you know, like Eastman of the South or whatever, one of the bigger programs that is very reputable still. So I got in. I was miserable because it was pretty toxic, as most arts programs can be, unfortunately. And I was not in the right mindset at that time. You know, I had gone through some like stuff at home. There was just like a lot of shifting and movement at the time. I was moving away from Virginia, right? And that's where my parents are. And so I also found that the people in the program, in the violin section, not only were they cliquey, but they literally grew up with each other in Greenville. So they all knew each other.
Yeah.
Very exclusive club right there.
Yeah.
So not only is it already competitive, it's already made worse because it's like you're still in high school.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, this is not what I wanted. So let me like try English too. I eventually did both, right? I slogged through the music program. I slogged through it. So I was like, that's why I applied to grad school in a different field. But I've come back to it now. I have a band that I'm in
Yeah.
that I play violin in. It's a post-punk band. So it's kind of interesting. We don't have a guitarist. It's just me. Bass, drums, vocals.
So you've been able to, like, transition to guitarist pretty easily?
Yeah, well, I'm not really like replacing it. It's more like it's just a different sound, right?
Yeah.
It's a completely different sound. but I do carry the melody underneath the vocals. And it's interesting because, like, I still have that muscle memory. I'm not going to say that I'm as good as I was when I was in school for it, because I'm not. Like, my intonation is probably not as good as it was. I can't do certain things anymore, like, technique-wise, or as well, right? But, you know, I think I came a long way, you know, like, for starting, quote-unquote, late on the instrument, as well as just being, like, in that toxic program. So.
Right.
So did you come up with the idea for having the band around you, or like how did that come about?
I used to be in a different band that I started in Greenville. It was not really a band. It was more like a duo, a project. It was a electronic, someone I met over there through Craigslist, and I started this duo. I'm not going to name this person or this band, but we both moved to Raleigh at the same time for different reasons. And we ended up not succeeding as well as we should have. I think we started off as really good friends, actually, and then eventually this person kicked me out of a 2-person band that I started.
That's
Oh,
just so.
damn.
I mean, that's like
Okay,
sitcom.
now we
That's
we
fucked up.
have to know who it is
That's fucked
now.
up.
material.
We
It is
got it.
sitcom.
You met them
It
on
was-
Craigslist too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like.
So we have to know their name now.
No, the thing is,
Yeah.
that's the thing. There was a lawyer involved because he
Oh
wanted
my
to keep
gosh.
the name, but not only
Intellectual
that.
property. You made the music together.
Well, that's the thing. This is what's fucked up. He said that he was going to drop the album without me anyway, using all my songs, lyrics, and vocals that I contributed. And he was started just like advertising the album drop, like the show, using my picture still. And I was like, you realize I'm not in the band anymore, right?
Yeah,
You can
my
do this.
goodness.
Well, at least don't use my lyrics, right? And give me the name back. And he said, no, I'm not going to throw away 8 months of work. So I had my lawyer friends like send scary letters.
Yo, just change your name. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
you're gonna be okay. You stole all this already.
Yeah.
Like,
And then just say featuring Ina Cariño. You know,
Yeah,
you could
no,
avoid
yeah.
all of that.
I mean,
no. It was wild, and my lawyer friend did it for free, so that was nice. And he gave me a little bit of money for the name, and he said, "Okay, fine, I'll just write new songs." So he was kind of fucked because like he had like a month and a half to write a whole new album, and I was like, "You do whatever you want to do with that. I'm not talking to you anymore." So that was wild. So I dropped out of the music scene because that was just like really like
Yeah, that's
off-putting
weird.
for me for a while, and I was in grad school anyway, so I ended up just concentrating on that. And then after grad school, like past the middle of the pandemic, it's now, right? Because I just joined this band last year, so it's been interesting getting back into that. And yeah, that's kind of what the trajectory was.
did you all play Iguanatropolis? Did I see that somewhere?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know Lucas.
Hey.
was in there, yeah.
Yeah. That was it, though,
Yeah, we
yeah.
did. We did. We're trying to book some more shows, so yeah.
Wow,
I love
let us know.
Iguanatropolis.
Yeah,
Let us know.
we will. I will advertise it for sure on my Instagram.
So do you write any of the music?
Yeah, we've been actually writing a bunch of songs now. I joined late through when they started because they were trying to find either a guitarist or something to replace the guitarist, and they found me, and they'd already written like 5 songs, and that's our first EP. But we started writing new stuff after that, and I'm definitely contributing a little more. So yeah.
Good. Are you like having any like parallels between your poetry and your music writing?
Not really. It's very different. Like when I write, like it's very organic and sporadic. I don't sit down and have a daily writing practice like they told me to when I was in grad school.
Right.
I kind of just like if I have a line in my head and I end up like writing it down in my notes app or whatever, and then I think of another one later, and then I'm like, well, I have this stuff I want to work on it, and then I sit down, or I'll wake up at night and be like, oh, that's a cool idea. Let me start writing a little bit of it now, right? That's how I kind of work. With music, it's a little more intentional for me because I'm kind of like a music theory brainiac as well, because there's another puzzle, right? So I think about, like, when composing, I think I'm a little too technical for my band members sometimes, so I try to reel it in, and I'm like, well, let's just jam, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
Are you the circle of fifths person?
that's me.
Yeah, that is you.
That is
Of
me,
course, yeah.
unfortunately.
Lovely.
What's the name of the band?
Co-ed dorms.
Co-ed Dorms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dorms.
I like it.
So-
And then, or what were you gonna say, Jack?
I was gonna ask something, and I lost my train of thought. You first.
I
I gotta
just-
pull the rabbit out of the hat again.
You gotta get it out. Okay,
Yeah,
well
yeah,
we're
yeah,
gonna
get
look
the
on in there. But
Go in there.
co-ed dorms, definitely check it out. Honestly, I was just gonna see about shout outs or anything. Did you have a question?
I did. Just give me a second.
All right. Well.
I can't do it when you're watching. Don't look
Yeah,
at me.
sorry. I'm gonna look the other
Don't look
way
at me,
real
though.
quick. Co-ed dorms though sounds great. Well, yeah, just let us know when the next show is.
Yeah.
Feast as well. Did you have any shout outs while Jack thinks about this? Any
Shout outs? Shout outs for like anything?
shout out the book?
Shout out my book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's for
I was told by a friend of mine, who's a pretty prominent poet as well. Like he's like, sometimes we're afraid to shout ourselves out, but we don't have the privilege of like these bigger names to have like them do all the shouting out for us.
Exactly.
Like my press is a good press, it's a reputable press, and they do a lot of it for me. But I have to sort of stand my own because we don't have the privilege of just like letting it sit and like suddenly it's like a big blown up book, right? So I don't feel like it's a shameless thing to just be like, yeah, look at my book. So yeah, buy my book.
Yeah, go buy Feast. Alice James Books.
Yeah. Bookshop.org, Amazon as well.
Yeah, we'll have the link in the review and under the podcast, maybe.
Review's already out, Jack.
Yep, the review's.
Yeah,
already
you wrote it.
I wrote it.
That's how good it was.
Thank you for that review.
Yeah, no, I knew it was already out. Though. It made me look like a jackass. I'm hoping that the people who are listening to it don't know the review is out. So you understand, it's a metacognitive process here that you ruined. You fucking ruined.